Welcome to the CompuSchmooze video podcast. This is episode number 5 for Friday, January 15th, 2010. Hi everybody, welcome to the CompuSchmooze video podcast. I'm your host, Steve Lubetkin. I write the CompuSchmooze column for the Jewish Community Voice of Southern New Jersey. You can see the column online at jewishvoicesnj.org. And you can see our past CompuSchmooze podcasts at CompuSchmooze.com. In this month's program segment, we're going to talk about a product that is in a class called Assistive Technologies. There are a number of technology products that are designed to help people with disabilities of all kinds to work better and more efficiently and more easily in a world that isn't often friendly to people with disabilities. It's called the PulsePen. It's made by LiveScribe. This is what the box looks like. And we'll take a little closer look at it on this edition of the CompuSchmooze video podcast. The PulsePen is a smart pen that has a memory chip in it so that you can record audio and synchronize it with the notes that you take using the pen and a special notepad. There are a number of ways this pen can be helpful, as we found out when we talked to our guest on this program, Laurie Katz. Laurie is a learning specialist in the Cherry Hill, New Jersey school system who's using the pen with kids who have special needs, and she has a special need of her own.
Probably about 9 or 10 years ago, I was sitting in a meeting, and all of a sudden my handwriting changed dramatically. It went from big, flowy, nice handwriting to little teeny tiny handwriting, and I remember commenting to my friend who was sitting next to me, something's wrong. I don't know, I can't write big anymore. And then I proceeded to have a number of years where I had little tiny handwriting and would go to a doctor and no one knew what was wrong with me. You know, they thought I had a spine problem, a disc problem, who knows what problem, maybe something was, no one knew. Until I went to a physiatrist who said he thought I had Parkinson's and referred me to a movement specialist. And the movement specialist diagnosed me as having Parkinson's. I got a second opinion who agreed I had Parkinson's. And one of the things that happen to most people is they get something called micrographia, which is teeny tiny handwriting, and that's exactly what happened to me. I can write. I write slowly, and it's very small, so that people don't always know that there's something wrong, but it's very inefficient for the job that I do.
Laurie talked about why she's finding the PulsePen particularly useful in her line of work, and also mentioned how she got some help from the State Department of Vocational Rehabilitation.
I work on a child study team, and we have excessive amount of paperwork to do. Now a lot of it's on the computer, which helps, but even that I only type with my left hand because right now the right side of my body seems to be more involved. So it was taking me a tremendous amount of time to get anything written. So I went to, I guess it was Division of Voc Rehab, and they did a free assessment of me, which I didn't know that they would do. And felt that my writing problems were significant enough that I needed some assistive technology. So I have been using Dragon Naturally Speaking for a number of years, primarily to write reports, but often to do IEPs. There's a lot of, again, written work in my job, and so I needed something that would help me.
One of the things that Laurie discovered was a challenge for her when she was diagnosed with Parkinson's was being able to write, and writing is a big part of her job.
I do assessments of children, and I was finding that I was not able to write fast enough to keep up with the children either reading or giving me verbal answers. And we have an assistive technology person in our district who is very knowledgeable, and last year came to me and said, there's something called a smart pen, and I think it would help you because you've always said you can't keep up when the kids are reading.
Laurie told us a little bit about how the pen works for her in her daily practice.
The pen is a digital recorder, and what it does is it records anything that you say or anything that someone else says. So what I do is I'll do an introduction that's picked up by, the pen. So I'll say, this is so-and-so, and we're reading a 4th grade passage. And I'll make an X, or I'll write a few words, and they will continue to read. It will all be taped on the pen. And then I can go back and put it in a cradle, which will then talk to the computer, so that whatever I wrote on that page will come up. And then I can go back and listen and fill in whatever I missed.
Now, it's important to realize that just because you're using an assistive technology, it doesn't mean that it's making things a lot more efficient in terms of saving you time.
Well, I'm not sure it's saving me time, but it's allowing me to be much more precise. So I can specifically say to a parent, your child gave me this answer, whereas the story needed an answer that was more well-rounded, had more factual information. It gives me a lot of time to go back and listen and really assess where the child's having their difficulties.
And Laurie told us a little bit about the pen applications that she uses in her work.
The pen does come with a notepad, so you can make a verbal list of what you have to do if you go shopping, things you need to do at work.
Tying into that is the forecasting. So let's make sure, Jenny, that you have filled out all the forecasting forms and making sure that that's all in the pipeline. Good to go.
I can see it's very powerful when working with children in the classroom, and I'd like to, work on that more. For example, if for a child who has trouble following the steps of a division problem, you can do a division problem with them and send the notebook and the pen home, and if you're very clear on the steps, the child can review it until they understand, exactly what to do.
And of course, whenever you use technology in a social setting, you always get a lot of attention if people haven't seen it before. Laurie talked about going to a conference and showing the pen off to some educators, and she was using it for her own needs, but they got some interest out of it as well.
It was all educational diagnosticians, which is the national name for what I do in New Jersey. And I often tape when someone, is doing a workshop, and I was taping a workshop by Amy Gable, who works for Pearson, and it was on a new evaluation test that we give called the Wyatt 3. And I always go up and introduce myself and say, I'm going to be taping you on my smart pen, and I was showing it to her, and there was a lot of interest in the pen by a lot of the educational diagnosticians. I also talked to Sharon Davis-Bianco, who is a professor at Rowan, and she runs the program. And when she teaches someone how to do an informal reading inventory, it's very difficult to learn how to do that and take all that information. So she was intrigued with the pen as a teaching tool for that kind of test.
The conference that Laurie went to also put her in touch with the folks at LiveScribe, and she's made a friend in Tim Fahlberg, who does an amazing job with some screencasts that are keyed to the LiveScribe pen. They're called pencasts. You can get them at Tim's blog, and they're specifically designed for educators to use in educational settings.
And since people were so interested in the pen, I wrote them saying, here are some applications that I find helpful. I'd like to let other people know about them. And I just wrote to customer service. Customer service put me in touch with someone named Tim Fahlberg, who is the education person for LiveScribe. And he and I have been communicating with each other, talking back and forth about applications of the pen. He's a mathematician, so he has a lot more ideas with math. But, he could see how helpful this pen would be in a variety of situations. I just sent him a packet of information on how to do what's called a running record, which is an informal reading inventory just called something else, because he knew a little bit about it, but now he's going to have more information that he can, use and explain to other people how you can use the pen when doing a running record.
And finally, Laurie gave us some tips about using the pen and the things that she's found that work and don't work when she's playing around with the device.
Well, the first one is don't lose your pen, because if you haven't downloaded it onto your computer, you're going to be out of luck. And I learned that by losing my pen. And you really need to find a good place to keep it so you know where it is at all times. You do have to tap on a certain place to get it to record and to stop, and that takes a day or two to figure out how hard to hit it. You know, do you need it on a hard surface? But that's just a little glitch, and it takes, you know, less than a day to get that under your belt. Otherwise, it's very easy to use. You know, you have to download it onto your computer. There's a little cradle you put it in. It's magnetized, but you can feel when it's in the right place because the magnet works. And, you know, and once it goes, it'll tell you on the pen that it's, you know, sending the information to the computer.
That's it for this episode of the CompuSchmooze video podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have comments or suggestions, email me. The email address is steve@compuschmooze.com. And you can also catch me out there on the net on Twitter, where I'm Podcast Steve. Thanks for joining us, and take good care. This program was produced in the studios of Professional Podcasts in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, on the web at professionalpodcasts.com.